1952 Washington, D.C. UFO incident, also known as the Washington Flap, the Washington National Airport Sightings, or the invasion of Washington, was a series of unidentified flying object reports from July 12 to July 29, 1952, over Washington, D.C. The most publicized sightings took place on consecutive weekends, July the 19th to the 20th and July the 26th to the 27th. At 11:40 p.m. on Saturday, July 19, 1952, Edward Nugent, an air traffic controller at Washington National Airport, spotted 7 objects on his radar. Although Andrews reported that they had no unusual objects on their radar, an airman soon called the base's control tower to report the sighting of a strange object. Staff Sergeant Charles Davenport observed an orange red light to the south. The light would appear to stand still, then make an abrupt change in direction and altitude. This happened several times. At one point, both radar centers at National Airport and the radar at Andrews Air Force Base were tracking an object hovering over a radio beacon. At 3 a.m., shortly before 2 United States Air Force F-94 Starfire jet fighters from Newcastle Air Force Base in Delaware arrived over Washington, all of the objects vanished from the radar at National Airport. Upon returning to Dayton, Ruppelt spoke with an Air Force radar specialist, Captain Roy James, who felt that unusual weather conditions could have caused the unknown radar targets. After midnight on July 27, USAF Major Dewey Fournette, Project Blue Book's liaison at the Pentagon, and Lieutenant John Holcomb, a United States Navy radar specialist, arrived at the radar center at National Airport. Civilian planes flying into Washington reported seeing strange glowing objects in places where the radar was getting blips. As on July 20, the sightings and unknown radar returns ended at sunrise. Sumford also stated that the unknown radar targets could be explained by temperature inversion, which was present in the air over Washington on both nights the radar returns were reported. In response to a question as to whether the Air Force had recorded similar UFO radar contacts prior to the Washington incident, Sumford said that there had been hundreds of such contacts where Air Force fighter interceptions had taken place, but stated they were all fruitless. The conference proved to be successful in getting the press off our backs, Ruppelt later wrote. Finally, as a crew member related, the radar had a target which turned out to be the Wilson Line steamboat trip to Mount Vernon. The radar was sure as hell picking up the steamboat. Air Force Captain Harold May was in the radar center at Andrews AFB during the sightings of July the 19th to the 20th. At 3 a.m. on July 27, an Eastern Airlines flight over Washington was told that an unknown object was in its vicinity. The crew could see nothing unusual. Their conclusion was that a temperature inversion had been indicated in almost every instance when the unidentified radar targets or visual objects had been reported. Project Blue Book would eventually label the unknown Washington radar blips as false images caused by temperature inversion, and the visual sightings as misidentified meteors, stars, and city lights. In 2002, Class told a reporter that radar technology in 1952 wasn't sophisticated enough to filter out many ordinary objects, such as flocks of birds, weather balloons, or temperature inversions. The reporter added that UFO proponents argue that even then seasoned controllers could differentiate between spurious targets and solid, metallic objects. Class disagrees. It may be that we had 2 dumb controllers at National Airport on those nights. Added that the introduction of digital filters in the 1970s led to a steep decline in UFO sightings on radar. Ruppelt himself discovered that hardly a night passed in June, July, and August in 1952 that there wasn't an inversion in Washington, yet the slow-moving, solid radar targets appeared on only a few nights. According to Ruppelt, when he was able to interview the radar and control tower personnel at Washington National Airport, not a single person agreed with the Air Force explanation. When the object flew away a second time, it turned a deeper red color and moved over the city of Washington itself. This occurred less than 2 hours before Edward Nugent first spotted the unknown objects on his radar at Washington National. Dr. James E. McDonald, a physicist at the University of Arizona and a prominent ufologist in the 1960s, did his own analysis of the Washington sightings, including speaking with 4 pilots and 5 radar personnel who were involved with the 1952 Washington incident. He told the committee that the temperature inversion theory used to explain the unknown radar traces was quite untenable and that, in his opinion, the 1952 Washington UFO incident was an instance of unidentified aerial objects over our capital. Howard Coughlin, who was interviewed by McDonald about the incident, told a Washington Post reporter in 2002 that he was still convinced that he saw an object over Washington National. "I saw it on the radar screen and out the window. It was a whitish blue object. Not a light, a solid form, a saucer-shaped object.